Boris also serves on the OpenStack Foundation Board of Directors, where he helps evangelize the OpenStack community by regularly blogging about it at blog.mirantis.com, talking on behalf of the community at various conferences, and engaging in business development activities to attract new member companies and contributors. Please welcome Boris Renski to share his thoughts and views on OpenStack and how organizations are contributing to this open source community and finding ways to both cooperate and communicate. Boris?
All right, good morning, everyone. So, good to be here. Most of you probably regularly read a lot of headlines about the new hot thing in the open source infrastructure, that is OpenStack. And based on those headlines, I presume that a lot of you already know something about it. But headlines, they tend to give a little bit of a cursory view of the ecosystem. And OpenStack looks quite a bit different on the inside than on the outside. So today, I wanted to spend the next 30 minutes to give you a glimpse into what it's like to actually work in the OpenStack community and give a view from within. So OpenStack ecosystem has been defined as a cooperative ecosystem. And actually, until I personally started in OpenStack about 3 years ago, I wasn't even sure what Opetition meant. So I had to go to Wikipedia and look it up. So let me actually go ahead and read out loud the definition of Opetition from Wikipedia. So competition takes place when companies that are in the same market work together in the exploration of knowledge and research of new products, at the same time that they compete for market share of their products and in the exploitation of the knowledge created. So it's a very long and complicated definition, quite a bit of mouthful. I believe that there is a way to simplify things and explain what it means. So, for most people looking at OpenStack from outside, this is what OpenStack looks like. A big, happy party, and this guy right there, potentially Jonathan Bryce, the managing director of the OpenStack Foundation. However, for myself and most of the organizations playing an active role inside the OpenStack ecosystem, the picture is very different, and it looks more like this. So I wanted to dive into it and explore three things specifically. First, we'll talk about the territories being conquered in the OpenStack ecosystem today. Second, I'll highlight some of the weapons used by the different organizations to conquer those territories. And to close, I'll talk about the interesting emerging opportunities in OpenStack. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Territories being conquered, Chapter 1. So in explaining the territories, I actually decided to use a metaphor with the actual territories. And if you look at different opportunities and markets in the OpenStack today, there is one big island in the center, surrounded by a few smaller territories. That big island is the one that most of the organizations are after today, and I refer to that island as the OpenStack distro treasure island. In order to take that island, you have to conquer 3 beachheads, in my opinion. And you can see those beachheads represented on the picture. The first beachhead is what I refer to as the services beachhead. The second one is a training beachhead. And finally, the third one is the upstream influence beachhead. Now, OpenStack Distro Island is not actually the only interesting piece of territory that you can conquer in the OpenStack ecosystem. There is a bunch of smaller territories which analysts nowadays like to refer to as OpenStack products and solutions islands. And we'll talk about those in a little bit as well. Now, the interesting thing that I wanted to mention is that OpenStack is a peculiar beast. And when it comes to open source in general, the most common way to win in that space is to become the dominant distro of a particular open source solution. This kind of premise extends to OpenStack, but because OpenStack is so peculiar, there is no guarantee that the distro play in the OpenStack ecosystem is really the winning play. And it might turn out that there's really nothing to be caught when it comes to the currently assumed large OpenStack distro island. Whereas actually it's the products and solution islands that are the oasis, and the winning markets in OpenStack are going to emerge in those islands. So let me go really quickly, beachhead by beachhead, and explain to you what I mean by each one of these beachheads and what the significance of it is. So the first one is a services beachhead. Why is it a beachhead? So let me try and explain it in the following way. I think that when it comes to trying to win in any new market, particularly an open source market, there is no way to really early on understand what kind of product feature set you need to push out in order for it to be attractive. You can't just assume that I produce value-add functionality X around common open source distribution and everybody's going to start buying it. The only way to really understand it or come to a reasonable conclusion is by getting close to the customer. And as history shows, with emerging open source solutions, and OpenStack in particular, services is the first thing that the companies start buying. The barrier to entry into the services market is fairly minimal. Most importantly, like I said, it enables you to get close to the customer, learn from the customer, and then leverage that knowledge to start building pieces of a leveraged business model down the road. Also, it's quite important to understand that by engaging with customers through services, not only do you learn, but you also get the opportunity to create a reputation for yourself in that market. If you execute well and the customers are happy engaging with you for services, you get the opportunity to feature a lot of beautiful logos on your website and ultimately become the trusted partner for launching any kind of subsequent solutions. I think about a year and a half ago, almost 3 summits ago, OpenStack summits ago, I also talked about the OpenStack adoption curve and how different companies are going to be evolving their buying patterns as the OpenStack ecosystem evolves. And it was very clear that in the early days, the guys that were buying or doing anything of OpenStack were actually infrastructure vendors themselves. They were writing different driver plugins into the OpenStack, and very tech-savvy service providers and what I refer to as internet application vendors, or you can basically large SaaS companies. And the thing about these guys is that they're fairly tech-savvy, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. They typically already operate large infrastructure themselves. They have a very DIY-minded kind of approach to doing things, and they are highly unlikely to actually buy any kind of products or standardize on anybody's platform. If you look at large organizations like Google or Facebook, you all know that they've actually built their infrastructure themselves. And this is the case for OpenStack as well. And it's really not until this year, 2014, that we started seeing some meaningful enterprise traction in the OpenStack market. But the previous 3 years, in my opinion, the only thing you could effectively sell was services. So this, again, kind of is an explanation as to why services is an important beachhead that you start with early on. So let's take a look at the kind of lay of the land around the services beachhead real quick. I personally believe that we at Mirantis have been able to conquer and are now in control of the services beachhead. But other guys understand the importance of it also. So the guys that are attacking it today in the OpenStack ecosystem is Rackspace. So officially, Rackspace is a slightly different business model. Their business model, at least the stated business model, is not around services, but really around managed hosting. The idea is that they'll build a standards-based cloud in your data center that will be capable of bursting into their Rackspace cloud. That's their official go-to-market around OpenStack, but we know for sure that actually Rackspace does have its own distribution, and they do sell just pure services, consultative services in OpenStack. Canonical has their Ubuntu stack and their Ubuntu-based OpenStack distribution. So they do services tied to their Ubuntu stack. And finally, Red Hat started pushing in that respect very hard during the last year. Again, Red Hat has their Red Hat stack of OpenStack, and they're pushing quite hard to win the services market as well. Training, another very important beachhead that I wanted to spend a few minutes on. So first of all, it's easy to attack, and that's the reason to actually start penetrating into that beachhead early. But that's not really the primary reason why this beachhead is important. The reason why it's important is because training is not just about going out there and training people. When it comes to winning markets, training is about indoctrinating the evolving ecosystem around the market with your particular opinion. And opinion can mean a lot of things, but let me give you a couple of examples. So for example, in Mirantis, our opinion is that the mission behind OpenStack is to build the ubiquitous cloud platform that will be capable of gluing together heterogeneous data center infrastructure. And to that effect, we believe that OpenStack has to remain extremely open and flexible in terms of the components that can plug into it. And that is the opinion that we indoctrinate in our training. When we teach OpenStack courses, we teach pretty much upstream OpenStack. We go over the different plugins that the vendors have built. We don't tie our courses to a particular host OS or a particular stack. We talk about the full set of capabilities that OpenStack has there to offer and try to propagate this open message. The flip side, another opinion, is, for example, the Red Hat opinion, which I'm not saying is a bad one. It might be the correct one long term. The time will show. But their opinion is that it is really impossible for any kind of data center infrastructure fabric to be functioning properly and at the same time be flexible enough to support a high degree of variability around the underlying components. So if you really want enterprise-grade type of stack, you just have to standardize on one thing. And of course, in case of Red Hat, it should be the Red Hat stack. So this opinion thing is really not something I came up with. This is something from history. We know for sure, for instance, that in case of Red Hat, who is actually an investor in Mirantis, and we have a deep relationship with that organization, that training was instrumental in them winning, ultimately, the dominance in the Linux space. They were the ones that have introduced a very rigorous hands-on training that was much better than anybody else could offer out there. And then everybody who they trained then would get hired by different organizations. And when the organization wanted Linux, these guys were trained by Red Hat, so they'd come to the organization, they say, well, I know Red Hat Linux, how about you use these guys? And this kind of grassroots push through training was absolutely key to Red Hat winning in the Linux ecosystem. So quickly, who's attacking the training beachhead? There are two organizations in the OpenStack ecosystem really that are kind of, I would say, on par leaders around training, us and Rackspace. Red Hat was a later entrant into that space, but as I mentioned, they absolutely know the value of training and winning that beachhead to be successful, so they're just pounding with nuclear bombs on this beachhead right now, trying to take control over it. And realistically, right now, everybody else is doing training too, but I think that the majority of the organizations outside of us and Rackspace and Red Hat are just doing training for the sake of short-term kind of revenue flow rather than trying to educate the ecosystem of any particular opinion. So the next one is interesting, and that's the upstream influence beachhead. And I'm actually surprised to this day how few people understand the significance of this beachhead. So to highlight what I mean by that, I wanted to just read out loud a couple of quotes. If you were going to buy a service contract for your open source software, would you prefer your service provider actually be the certifiable authority on that very software? So think about it for a second. Second quote. In open source, being the source of the source code matters most. Since open source developers essentially give away software for free, the key to monetization lies in being known as the source of the code. Another explanation. To me, it seems to be very obvious, but if you look at the totality of the organizations that are actually playing in the OpenStack space today, very few realize that, and just a small subset of organizations are actually actively participating upstream. Some other data points about the same, why it's important. So Red Hat, being the smart open source guys, they understand the importance of having control of the upstream influence beachhead. And if you look at this chart right here, for the last 10 years, Red Hat has been the #1 contributor to Linux kernel. If you take a look at the modern example, Hadoop ecosystem, again, the two leaders in Hadoop today are Cloudera and Hortonworks. And what do you know? If you look at Hadoop contributions, Cloudera and Hortonworks are the leaders. So Yahoo's there in the center, but Yahoo is effectively an extension of Hortonworks to some extent. So to summarize in more concrete terms, rather than marketing terms, why upstream influence is an important beachhead is it allows you to actually help guide the roadmap of the solution that you're selling to the customer. And having that influence in really pragmatic terms also implies that you're simply able to land patches upstream faster. So if somebody's buying an OpenStack distribution from me, one of the things they're buying is making sure that I can stay on top of all the things that are happening in the community. They look to me as this gate, as the bridge between the organization and the upstream community. They want me to be able to quickly land patches if they find bugs. They want me to notify them if there's any kind of security holes. And it's simply not possible to do if you're not prominent upstream. So here is another very important thing when it comes to upstream influence in OpenStack specifically. And I'm going to go off on just a little bit of a tangent, but I think that it's important to understand for anybody who's considering doing OpenStack. So if you look at open source, there's really two ways that you can monetize open source today. One is you can have kind of an open source of the source code model, which is what Red Hat is doing in OpenStack and Linux, and Hortonworks is doing in case of Hadoop. Or you can have a proprietary value add model where you have an open core, and the core is effectively free, but then you have a lot of proprietary tools that create some sort of value add on top. And the second one is known to be a more viable historically model. You're simply able to make more money, scale faster, have better differentiation. And a lot of companies, they jump in onto the second model when it comes to OpenStack. But the problem with OpenStack is, in my opinion, that this model, the second model, can never work with OpenStack. Because in OpenStack, there is no core. And to have an open core model, you have to have a core. OpenStack, at this point in time, does not really have a core. So let me explain what I mean by that. OpenStack started just a few set of projects really primarily focused around VM orchestration. And what do you know? A number of early players came in, and their kind of claim to fame was that, we'll leverage the open core, but we'll sell a value add around metering and billing. Because naturally, if you want to use cloud in any organization, or VMs on demand in any organization, you need to be able to meter and bill. Now, what do you know? 1 year into it, OpenStack creates its own native metering and monitoring project called Ceilometer, which eats away immediately at a lot of the value that these guys have invested in proprietary solutions. And this thing continues to go on. The next step is around actually configuration management and orchestration. So there's a lot of guys around OpenStack today, like SaltStack, Puppet, Chef, that are effectively trying to piggyback the OpenStack momentum, sell their enterprise configuration management orchestration solutions. Same exact thing, OpenStack introduces Heat, which is a native orchestration service for OpenStack. Started out as really not the same kind of orchestration configuration management that Puppet does. It was kind of a clone of the Amazon CloudFormations template. But at this point, it evolved to actually become a full orchestration solution that does not only allow you to provision OpenStack infrastructure, but also deploy software on top of provision infrastructure and configure that software. So it's pushing very much into the Puppet and Chef space. And by being a native open OpenStack solution, it naturally has an edge. So now the next one is getting really interesting. Virtually every single company in OpenStack space, Mirantis included, said, OK, well, you need to have a deployment and management tool around OpenStack. If you get OpenStack, you need to be able to deploy it. You need to be able to add a server, remove a server, et cetera. And there's nothing in OpenStack that's doing it. So every single company going to play the OpenStack game built their own deployment suite. So what do you know? Next thing, OpenStack introduces OOO, which is OpenStack native deployment engine. So all of these guys that invested all this effort, toast. And this keeps going and gets even more interesting. So now there's a lot of platform as a service solutions that say OpenStack, well, it's all about infrastructure. How about we just, piggyback the OpenStack infrastructure and have them push our platform as a service. And the smaller platform as a service guys, as well as the big ones, actually, such as Cloud Foundry, said, OK, well, OpenStack is a good vehicle for us. And what do you know? Again, bam, just literally 3 months ago, OpenStack introduces Solum, which is a native platform as a service for OpenStack. And this sprawl, it continues. And I guess the takeaway here is that if you really want to play the OpenStack game, you don't want to waste time building proprietary value-add islands, at least at this point, while you don't really know what OpenStack core is and how far it's going to span. But instead, you should join the upstream contributions efforts. If you feel there is a gap, if you feel there is an opportunity, be the leader in actually openly voicing this gap and developing the solution to this gap upstream and harnessing actually the credibility points for having done that in the open rather than trying to build a proprietary value-add solution around it. So quick roundup on the situation with current state of play around upstream influence in OpenStack. So Red Hat, as I mentioned, has been a top committer to OpenStack since Folsom release. By far the top committer. They're the ones that understood the value of the upstream influence early on, and they're strongly holding on. Rackspace has actually been the #1 committer early, but they got displaced by Red Hat. So, and as more big players starting to realize the value of this beachhead, basically, Rackspace has been kind of bubbling down. We've made some progress. It took us a little bit of time to realize how it's important, but we moved from number 16 committer in Grizzly to number 5 committer in Havana, and Icehouse, actually. It took us some time because we were challenged with the problem of actually educating a horde of Russian engineers how to work upstream. And if any of you have worked with Russian engineers, it's kind of like a very alien thing. Russian engineers tend to just do a brilliant thing in the corner themselves, and then they just say, hey, there you go, I built it. But then the upstream community says, what the hell, you didn't mention anything about you're doing it, not interested. So took some education. HP is a strong player upstream, holding steady in second place. IBM, now that we're slowly embracing the OpenStack vehicle, they moved from number 6 to number 3 and continue to slowly gain. And finally, SUSE actually made a push recently. They weren't very serious upstream in OpenStack, but they continuously made progress, and now as of Icehouse release, they're number 6 upstream contributor. So quick roundup of where things stand. I mentioned I will talk to you really quickly about the small islands. So let me highlight those. So the islands that are present today really is something I refer to the AWS Fidelity Island, and that means that we're building an OpenStack distro that's compatible with AWS. Second one is Enterprise OpenStack Island, the best enterprise solution, VMware replacement using OpenStack for the enterprise. Managed Services Island. This is basically, we run your cloud. This is what effectively Rackspace is doing. And finally, the OpenStack Appliance Island. We put a distro into actual physical appliance. We ship you a box. Everything works. And then there's a complementary products island. We have a product that's complementary. We want to use OpenStack momentum to push us forward. So each one of them has a respective kind of resident leader right now. Cloud scaling is the AWS Fidelity guys. Enterprise OpenStack is Piston Cloud. Managed Services is Meta Cloud and Rackspace, but I'm convinced that this island is going to get very crowded because Managed Services is kind of a bread and butter for companies like HP and IBM. They haven't gotten their act together around kind of this solution for OpenStack yet, but once they do, it's going to get very challenging for Rackspace and Meta Cloud. And finally, OpenStack Appliance Island is Nebula and Morph Labs. As far as complementary products, some people can argue with me, but I think that out of everybody trying to piggyback OpenStack momentum today to get visibility for their own solution, the guys that played it the best is Inktank with their Ceph storage solution. And when it comes to the big island, we still control the services beachhead. We share the training beachhead together with Rackspace, and Red Hat as a resident kind of a guy holding on and controlling the upstream influence beachhead today. So let's quickly look at the weapons used. First weapon, really, this is a weapon that is used not just on OpenStack, but in any market, is the weapon of marketing and PR. And the way I see the weapon of marketing and PR is it's really kind of like a doping pill. If you have a certain capability, you can swallow the marketing and PR pill, and you can run a little bit faster and better on that capability for a little bit of time. And to be able to leverage that, you have to have some sort of message. So these are the key players and their messages. Red Hat, their messages, we own the upstream influence beachhead, and we are the smartest open source players out there. Canonical, we are #1 most used host OS for OpenStack, and they try to promote that message as hard as they can. Rackspace, we started OpenStack. That's their message. Mirantis, we're the largest pure play with most customers. And by pure play, I mean we don't have any historic product portfolio baggage that would effectively make us biased towards leveraging OpenStack, not to just sell you OpenStack, but to sell you something else that we have around. Cloud scaling, customers want opinion, and our opinion is AWS Fidelity is important. That's their positioning. Piston, we started OpenStack again, and we are funner than Rackspace. Finally, IBM and HP have exactly the same play, and they are like We are IBM, and most importantly, we are committed to OpenStack. And it's not a bad message. I can completely understand the message of IBM and HP in this ecosystem because they don't need to prove to anybody that they're special. They already have all the customers. So all they need to do is to prove to the customers that they are committed to that technology. And customers that have been buying stuff from them for the last 50 years will hear about their commitment and will start buying that technology from them. A little bit of evidence to how this works. So this is excerpts of the opening statements from Canonical and Red Hat for their sponsorships of the last summit. If you look at Red Hat, say that we are the top code contributor. That's what it starts with. And they're pushing the upstream influence beachhead as hard as they can. Canonical, again, most OpenStack clouds run on Ubuntu. Did you know that? Push that they own the host OS as hard as they can. Typical headlines you see every day is IBM makes big bet on OpenStack. HP completely committed to OpenStack. So they're pushing this commitment thing. They want their customers to know that it's not just something that they're playing with on the side, but they're fully committed to it, and the customer should be comfortable with buying OpenStack from these organizations. Partnerships is another weapon, and it's an interesting one because in that case, if you think about partnerships, how do you leverage a partnerships weapon? Historically, the way you did it is you use certifications. You have a platform that is your platform, and then you certify a bunch of partners on that platform. And the problem here is that when it comes to using the partnerships weapon, naturally the big guys like IBM, HP, or Red Hat are much better positioned to actually use that weapon and win with that weapon against the smaller guys. Because if you're talking about, for example, using a PR weapon, I can be a cool, interesting startup. I can, spin an interesting headline, and maybe somebody will write about me. But it's much harder for me to actually get, company X to certify against my, no-name distribution. But if I'm Red Hat or IBM, certify against IBM, ooh, very easy. The problem with that is that because there is such a uneven playing field in the partnership space, this kind of goes against the inherent mission of OpenStack and OpenStack Foundation to level the playing field for all the infrastructure players. So the interesting thing that's happening is there is some active efforts that we're a part of to actually help even this playing field. And what we're doing is we're trying to open source the testing of various components around upstream OpenStack. So typically, upstream communities have been very, how would you say, lax or disinterested in actually, exposing the results of the tests or providing the standard set of testing tools for third parties that are trying to validate their solutions against the code. Typically, it's the downstream vendors like Red Hat would do it. Red Hat would have a partnership program for Linux. They'd certify everybody against Linux. Now, in OpenStack, there's actually an effort to create open testing harness. It kind of goes to the example that I've shown with OpenStack has no core. Well, that no core thing actually spans onto the tools used for validating and certifying various solutions against OpenStack. And there's an initiative that we're pushing to actually enable all vendors out there to actually go ahead and use a standard set of tools, run a series of tests against upstream OpenStack, not a particular flavor of OpenStack, but upstream OpenStack, and make sure that those tests and validations are relevant for most of the downstream vendors. This way, anybody validating against OpenStack will have to validate just against one tree, one upstream branch of OpenStack, rather than having to spend money to certify with Red Hat, with SUSE, with Canonical, with IBM, with HP, with Cisco, et cetera. And more importantly, what we're doing is we're putting infrastructure in place as part of OpenStack to expose the solutions of those vendors and results of those tests in the open. So you can literally go to like openstack.org, and if you want to see if Cisco's SDN Fabric X works with OpenStack, you can go search for the driver. You can find the description of how to configure the OpenStack environment to use that driver. You can find the context for whoever's responsible for maintaining it, and you can see how it's been verified through the actual test harness. So to close, I wanted to touch on a few emerging opportunities. So this part probably going to be interesting for you guys because if you were to go in business or build a company today in OpenStack, what is there in OpenStack that you can use? What are the interesting opportunities? So the first one you probably have heard of a lot over here at Percona Live, and that is the Trove database as a service. And the reason why I think it's very interesting is because cloud in general still to this date is largely looked at by most people as pretty much VMs on demand. The idea cloud emerged from Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. That's how people picked the Elastic Compute Cloud. They started using cloud across everywhere. That's how cloud basically became cloud. And because of that, it's inherently tied to the concept of basically virtual machine orchestration. And if you look at customers using OpenStack today, most of them are really interested in virtual machine orchestration. Everything else is kind of like pretty sauce around. But in reality, virtual machine orchestration is really a small market. It's a sliver of a market compared to the database market. So Trove to the database is the same as the Nova to the hypervisor. The hypervisor, Nova can manage a variety of hypervisors like KVM, can use vSphere, Zen, and it's a kind of this universal orchestration layer on top of all of it. So Trove is a database as a service on top of a variety of database fabrics. And it has a promise of becoming as prominent in the database management space as Nova has become in the VM orchestration space. Just a few highlights. So, the database as a service market is a huge market. 451 Group projects at 1.6 billion by 2016. Very importantly, it's a greenfield space on OpenStack. So if you try to go on Nova right now, it's going to be a very hard uphill battle. There's a lot of guys already dominating their upstream. There's its own politics. But Trove, it's a new thing. Just go there, start contributing, become a prominent upstream contributor. There is an opportunity for you to really make a difference. And finally, I think that Trove, unlike a lot of other efforts in that space in the past, has a better promise to be successful because, for most organizations, database is like a holy cow. It's probably the last thing you will ever give away to the vendor, or outsource, or host in a cloud is your database. The database is your baby. When you're trying to build a proprietary database as a service solution, or God forbid, host a database as a service solution, it's very hard to convince anybody to actually give their holy cow over to your no-name brand and put the eggs into your basket. When it comes to OpenStack and Trove specifically, it's an open fabric. OpenStack has a lot of momentum as a standards type fabric. Trove as a part of it will actually alleviate a lot of those concerns. This one very few know about, but it's very interesting. And this is a project called Storyboard and Infra. They're kind of related. But the point here is that OpenStack by itself, in general, is kind of like a commoditization movement. There's not, to be honest, so much innovation happening in OpenStack. OpenStack is really about commoditizing and leveling the playing field for everybody. Now, where there is innovation, though, is in the development process and infrastructure supporting it. Because OpenStack right now is one of the largest, if not the largest, open source community. There is over 400 commits per day. 10,000 test jobs run in parallel at peak to validate the commits against trunk, spanning across 340 VMs. So that scale and the whole development approach that OpenStack community is using is completely unprecedented. Nobody's been doing this kind of stuff, and nobody has had an automation effort and kind of process workflow effort around simplifying this kind of distributed development effort. And OpenStack is really the only open source community that has been actively investing in infrastructure to support all of this. And all of that stuff that they've built is open. So you can actually go in there, you can help augment it, and you can productize the stuff. Because I tell you, there's a lot of companies out there that would love to embrace the OpenStack development model and leverage the infrastructure that has been built to support this unprecedented development scale and approach. And finally, I wanted to close to talk about Solum a little bit, because there's been a lot of controversy. So Solum is the native platform as a service for OpenStack. And The minute it was announced, everybody said, well, what are you talking about? This is such a congested market. There's so many platforms as a service out there. Cloud Foundry has absolutely escaped velocity. There's no way that OpenStack can catch up. But I do not agree, and I will tell you why. First reason is obvious, because when it comes to infrastructure clouds, DevOps and improved engineering velocity, which largely is enabled for PaaS, is the top kind of wanted thing. That's why companies buy OpenStack. But the second two are a little bit more interesting. Number two is that vertical integration in platform plays typically works. If you think back to even like the Microsoft and Netscape example. Microsoft had nothing to do with browsers. Netscape was the breakaway leader, but what do you know? Microsoft owned the platform. It was easy for them to displace Netscape by just creating Internet Explorer. So it's a very basic and removed example from the infrastructure space, but I think it illustrates the point that OpenStack is becoming de facto standard infrastructure stack. And any kind of service that is native to that service, that integrates natively with, for example, OpenStack authorization, of OpenStack image management, et cetera, will typically function better than the one that kind of spans horizontal, different infrastructure stacks. And because Solem just focuses on supporting OpenStack only, over time, it has the promise of becoming better. But there is even a more interesting business component to why Solem is real, and that is that Red Hat cannot allow for VMware or Pivotal to own the platform as a service space of Cloud Foundry. They know that OpenShift has not been a winning strategy for them, so they're doing a kind of a reset, take two with Solem. And they're not going to support Cloud Foundry Foundation. They are going to put their eggs in the Solem basket, and they are going to leverage all the resources that they have to actually make Solem successful. So at this point, Solem has the vertical integration promise. In addition, it has the business driver that is really wanting to make it real. So it's a good opportunity for anybody to actually piggyback that and compete for dominance with Red Hat in the Solem space. I think that's all I had. Thank you.